if you feel drained after being around people, if you need days alone to recover from a single social interaction, if you've been called too sensitive your entire life, this is not random, and it's not a personality quirk. It's a nervous system that was trained. Most trauma-born empaths don't realize this. They think they're just introverted. They think they just need space. Carl Jung would say something much darker. He would say your sensitivity is not just a gift, it's armor. And armor is only built when something dangerous once existed. You feel things other people don't seem to feel, not just more intensely, differently. You walk into a room and absorb an emotional weather before a single word is spoken. You sense the tension beneath the smile, the grief beneath the laughter, the loneliness beneath the performance. You feel it in your body, a heaviness, a shift, something registering in you that nobody else seems to notice. And because of this, because the world is so loud, so relentless, so emotionally overwhelming, you have learned to be alone, not because you hate people. You feel people more deeply than most, but because being around them costs you something enormous, something that takes days of solitude to recover, something that most people around you have never understood, and you have long since stopped trying to explain. They call you cold, distant, antisocial, too sensitive, too intense, too much and not enough simultaneously. But Carl Jung would look at you, at the specific constellation of traits, this particular way of moving through the world, and he would say something that perhaps no one has ever said to you with this kind of clarity. What you carry is not a flaw. It is not a disorder. It is not evidence that something went wrong with you. It is the result of something that was done to you in the earliest chapters of your life, before you had the language or the power to protect yourself. And the empathy, the sensitivity, the need for solitude, all of it is not weakness wearing a philosophical costume. It is survival intelligence, sophisticated, costly, extraordinarily effective survival intelligence. And this video is going to show you exactly how it was built, what it is protecting you from, and what it will cost you if you never learn to see it clearly. Nobody is born a loner. Solitude as a survival strategy, solitude as the only safe place, that is learned. It is carved into the nervous system by repeated experiences that taught one unbearable lesson. People are not safe. Not all people. Not always. But enough people. Enough times. In the years when the nervous system was most plastic, most impressionable, most desperately dependent on the emotional environment around it. Think about what it means to grow up in an environment where the emotional atmosphere was unpredictable, where the adults around you were themselves unhealed, where their moods were weather systems you had to learn to read for your own survival, where love came conditionally or inconsistently, or not at all in the ways a child's soul requires. In that environment, something extraordinary happens in certain children, something that looks like a gift from the outside, but feels like a burden from the inside. They develop hypervigilance. Why are you so quiet all of a sudden? Why does everything affect you so much? You're too sensitive. Toughen up. Stop making everything about your feelings. I don't have time for this right now. The child who grows up reading emotional runes for survival becomes extraordinarily attuned to the emotional states of others. Every micro-expression, every shift in tone, every silence that carries weight. They learn to feel the emotional landscape of a space before they consciously process it. This is not a gift they chose. It is a skill they developed because their safety depended on it. Carl Jung understood that the psyche is a system of extraordinary intelligence. It does not make random choices. Every adaptation, every defense, every coping mechanism is purposeful. It is a psyche doing what it must to protect the organism from a world that felt, and perhaps genuinely was, too much to bear without armor. And the armor these children build is simultaneously the most sensitive and the most isolating armor in the psychological repertoire. They learn to feel everything, and they learn to trust no one with what they feel, because in an environment where their sensitivity was forged, showing what they felt was dangerous. Vulnerability was exploited. Openness was punished. Emotional honesty was met with dismissal, mockery, or the particular cruelty of being told that what you feel is wrong. And so the pattern crystallizes. Feel everything. Show nothing. Retreat to solitude where the only emotional weather is your own. By the time this child becomes an adult, the pattern is so deeply encoded, it no longer feels like a strategy. It feels like identity. It feels like just who they are. But it is not who they are. It is what they built to survive who they were around. Carl Jung gave us a map for understanding the specific psychological constellation, and it is more precise and more compassionate than anything the modern self-help world has offered. At the foundation of his understanding sits the concept of the highly sensitive psyche. Jung recognized that there exists within the population a percentage of individuals whose nervous systems are constitutionally calibrated to process experience at a deeper level than average. More sensory input, more emotional resonance, more complex inner processing of external events. He did not pathologize this. He considered it one of the most significant psychological variations in the human species. These individuals, when developed healthily, become the artists, the healers, the seers, the philosophers, the people who feel the world's pain acutely enough to name it, transform it, give it form. But when this sensitive constitution meets early trauma, when a highly sensitive child encounters an environment that is emotionally unsafe, unstable, or invalidating, something specific happens. The sensitivity turns inward and outward simultaneously, creating a paradox that defines the trauma-born empath loner's entire experience. Inward, because the inner world becomes the only safe world. Rich, complex, endlessly absorbing. A universe inside the self where the emotional weather can be controlled, where the overwhelming input of the external world can be processed at a manageable pace. This is why empath loners often have extraordinarily rich inner lives, not as a compensation for loneliness, as a genuine alternative reality they built because the external one was too painful to fully inhabit. Outward, because despite the retreat into solitude, the sensitivity to others does not diminish. It intensifies. The trauma-born empath does not stop feeling other people's emotions. They become more attuned to them, not less. They simply stop trusting those emotions enough to respond to them openly. Jung called this the tension of opposites. The fundamental structure of the psyche is built on opposing forces held in dynamic tension. And the trauma-born empath loner lives in perhaps the most acute version of this tension in the human psychological spectrum. They are simultaneously the most emotionally connected and the most emotionally isolated people in any room. They feel your pain before you name it, and they will not tell you they felt it. They will quietly absorb it, carry it home in their nervous system, and spend 3 days alone recovering from the contact. Jung also identified what he called the introverted intuitive type, one of his 8 psychological types, as the category most prone to this specific pattern. The introverted intuitive perceives through the unconscious. They process meaning, pattern, and emotional truth through an internal orientation that is largely invisible to those around them. They are the people who know things they cannot explain, who sense outcomes before events unfold, who read psychological subtext in a conversation with the same ease that others read the literal words. And they are the people most likely to have been profoundly misunderstood, dismissed, or pathologized by a world that privileges extroverted, rational, surface-level processing. But here is where Jung's framework becomes truly essential. He argued that every psychological type, when unconscious of itself, develops a shadow. And the shadow of the trauma-born empath loner is one of the most important and most dangerous shadows in the entire psychological landscape. Here is the dark truth that the empath loner community almost never talks about. The sensitivity is real. The pain is real. The need for solitude is real. The wounds are real. All of it is real. But woven through all of it, invisible, unexamined, protected by the very depth of the sensitivity itself, is a shadow. And that shadow has a cost that quietly accumulates over years and decades into something that looks remarkably like the very isolation the empath loner was trying to escape. Jung identified projection as one of the primary mechanisms of the unexamined shadow. And for trauma-born empath loners, projection operates in a specific and insidious way. Because they were hurt by people who were emotionally dangerous, they learn, reasonably, understandably, to anticipate danger and emotional connection. The nervous system that was trained to scan for threat does not stop scanning simply because the original threat is gone. It continues its surveillance, looking for the pattern it knows. The dismissal, the exploitation, the betrayal, And here's a dark mechanism. When you are looking for something hard enough, you find evidence of it everywhere. Not because it is everywhere, but because the unconscious filters reality through the lens of its deepest expectations. The empath loner who withdraws before connection can become real, who self-protects before vulnerability can be risked, is not always reading the room accurately. Sometimes they are projecting the emotional weather of their childhood onto people who carry none of it. They feel what they expect to feel. They see what they were trained to see. And they retreat before they can discover whether this time, in this relationship with this person, it might have been different. The shadow here is not cruelty. It is not selfishness. It is something more subtle and more heartbreaking. It is the unconscious decision to never find out, to remain safe in the solitude that was once necessary and has since become a prison with the door left unlocked, because the person inside has forgotten they have the key, or perhaps has never believed they deserve to use it. Jung also warned about what he called the savior complex that frequently develops in highly empathic individuals, because they feel others' pain so acutely, and because their own pain taught them that nobody came to save them. Empath loners often develop an unconscious pattern of positioning themselves as the emotional rescuer in relationships. They are drawn to people in pain. They recognize suffering with precision that feels like radar, and they give enormously, exhaustingly, sometimes self-destructively, to the healing of others, while rarely, if ever, allowing themselves to receive the same. This is not generosity. Or rather, it is generosity weaponized by the shadow. It is a way of being needed without being truly known, of being close without being vulnerable, of connection that maintains the fundamental safety of asymmetry, where the empath gives and the other receives, and the empath's deepest self remains carefully, perpetually protected. And the cost is enormous, because a life organized around giving what you never received, while ensuring you never have to risk receiving it, is a life lived at the edge of your own story, always a witness, never quite the protagonist. Jung did not believe the answer for the trauma-born empath loner was to become less sensitive. He would have considered that a tragedy. The sensitivity itself is not the wound. It is one of the most extraordinary capacities the human psyche can develop. The work is not to diminish it. The work is to integrate it, to bring it under the governance of a conscious, examined, self-aware psyche rather than leaving it in the service of an unexamined wound. Here is how that integration begins. Step 1. Distinguish between empathy and absorption. True empathy is a capacity to feel what another feels while remaining grounded in your own separate experience. Absorption is what trauma-born empaths often practice instead, taking the other's emotional state fully into themselves, losing the boundary between their experience and the others. Begin to notice the difference in your body. Empathy feels like resonance, a tuning fork that vibrates in response. Absorption feels like flooding, like you have disappeared into the other person's weather. The moment you can feel the difference, you can begin to choose which one you practice. Step 2. Examine your solitude honestly. Not all solitude is equal, and Jung would insist on this distinction. There is sacred solitude, chosen, nourishing, genuinely restorative. The solitude that fills you up and sends you back into the world more whole. And there's defensive solitude, the solitude that keeps you safe from a risk you are no longer sure is real. Ask yourself honestly, with compassion, and without self-judgment, which kind am I choosing right now? Both are valid, but only one of them is free. Step 3. Trace the projection. When you feel that familiar withdrawal impulse, that conviction that a person or situation is unsafe, pause before you act on it. Ask yourself, am I reading this person, or am I reading my history? Is this present danger, or is this the emotional weather of a place and a time I have long since left? You will not always know the answer immediately, but asking the question begins to create the gap between stimulus and response where genuine choice lives. Step 4. Practice asymmetric vulnerability. For the empath loner, full immediate vulnerability is not the goal and never should be. The wound is real and deserves to be honored. Instead, practice what might be called graduated disclosure. One true thing shared with one safe person. Not everything, not immediately, but something real. Something that could be met with dismissal or could be met with genuine witness. Allow yourself to find out which it will be. This is how trust is built, not assumed and not abandoned, but tested slowly and honestly. Step 5. Reclaim receiving. Notice how you respond when someone offers you genuine care, support, or emotional presence. Most empath loners deflect it, change the subject, minimize their own need, give something back immediately to restore the comfortable asymmetry of giving. Practice, just once, just briefly, letting it land. Sitting with being cared for without immediately redirecting the attention. This is one of the most radical acts available to the trauma-born empath, and one of the most healing. Step 6. Let your sensitivity serve you, not just others. You've spent years using your sensitivity as a radar system for other people's needs, other people's pain, other people's emotional landscapes. Begin to turn that same extraordinary attunement toward yourself. What do you need right now? Not what do others need from you. Not what would be most useful or most giving or most invisible. What is the part of you that feels everything actually need right now today? Something extraordinary happens when a trauma-born empath loner begins to integrate their shadow. The sensitivity does not diminish. If anything, it deepens, but it changes quality. It becomes less like an open wound that every emotional current aggravates and more like a precision instrument, capable of extraordinary attunement when you choose to use it, capable of being set aside when you need to rest. The solitude that was once purely defensive begins to transform into something genuinely sacred. You begin to choose it rather than flee into it. And chosen solitude has a completely different quality than defensive solitude. It nourishes rather than just protects. It fills you rather than simply shielding you. The relationships in your life begin to shift, not because you become less sensitive, but because you are no longer using your sensitivity exclusively as a surveillance system for threat. You begin to use it for something it was always capable of, but rarely allowed. For genuine, deep, unhurried, mutual intimacy. The kind that does not require you to disappear into the other person. The kind where two fully present selves can actually meet. Jung believed that the trauma-born sensitive person, when they complete the work of integration, possesses something genuinely rare in the human community. The capacity for depth of connection, depth of perception, and depth of compassion that most people only approach at the edges of their most profound experiences. You were not built for the surface. You never were. The wound that drove you into solitude was real. The protection it offered was necessary, but it was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to keep you safe until you were strong enough to do this work. And if you are here, if you have listened this far, if every word of this landed somewhere real and specific inside you, you are strong enough. The door of the solitude you built to survive is unlocked. It has always been unlocked. And the world on the other side, not the world that hurt you, but the world as it actually is now, is waiting for you to step into it, carrying everything you are, all of it, the sensitivity, the depth, the wounds that became wisdom, the solitude that taught you to know yourself, all of it, integrated, conscious, yours. Now I want to hear from you. Are you a trauma-born empath loner? And if you are honest with yourself right now, is your solitude sacred or is it defensive? Is it chosen, or is it the only place that ever felt safe? Write it in the comments, even if it is just one word, because the person reading your comment right now, the one who has never told anyone they feel this way, needs to know they are not alone in this. If this video felt like someone finally had the language for something you have carried your whole life, subscribe to this channel, because this is exactly what we do here every single week. We go into the places most people are afraid to look, and we bring back the truth. The next video is already waiting, and I promise it was made for you too.